There are stories you don't find in tabloids or record charts. Stories that live quietly, whispered in dressing rooms, remembered by people who once shared a scene, a laugh, a meal. When the cameras rolled, Elvis Presley was a star. But when they stopped, he was something even rarer. Kind. And this is that story. Not of fame or fortune, not of charts or jumpsuits, but how one man, with every reason to be proud, chose instead to be gentle. Hollywood didn't know what to do with Elvis Presley when he arrived. He wasn't trained in theatre or schooled in film. He was a southern boy with music in his veins and sincerity in his smile. The studios wanted an image, the rebel, the heartthrob, the box office guarantee. But what they got, day after day on set, was something simpler and far more powerful. A young man who treated everyone, from the lighting tech to the leading lady, like family. Crew members would say he knew everyone's name by the second day. He'd walk through the lot and wave at extras, asking how the kids were, how long they'd been working. He never passed a grip without a sir or ma'am. And if lunch came round, Elvis wasn't hiding in some private trailer. He was usually sitting with the crew, swapping stories, breaking bread, and cracking jokes that made everyone forget they were on a tight schedule. Hollywood in the 1960s was not a humble place. Egos strutted down hallways like peacocks. But Elvis, the biggest star of all, didn't act like a king. He carried his own script. He opened doors for co-stars. He thanked the janitors and hugged the wardrobe ladies. It wasn't for show. It was who he was. He came from a world where respect wasn't optional. It was the fabric of life. And that small-town courtesy never left him, no matter how famous he became. Actors who worked with him said, he made you feel seen. He'd walk up to a nervous extra and say, "Hey honey, you're doing great. Don't let that camera scare you." And in that moment, the nerves would melt, because Elvis Presley himself had noticed them. Ask around and you'll find hundreds of quiet moments that tell you who he really was. There was a day on King Corral when a crew member slipped and twisted his ankle. Before the medic even arrived, Elvis was the first one kneeling beside him, hand on his shoulder, saying, "Easy now, buddy. We'll get you fixed up." On Lovin' You, one of his first films, he gave his co-star a diamond bracelet because she admired it in a shop window. And he didn't tell a soul. She found it wrapped in tissue paper with a note that said, "For your kindness." During Viva Las Vegas, when the crew had been working overtime in the desert heat, Elvis brought cold drinks for everyone out of his own pocket, insisting, "If I'm sweating, you are all sweating too." And on Change Your Habit, his final film, one of the young extras later said, "He was so gentle. You could tell he was tired when he looked at you, but he listened. No one else that famous ever listened like that." These weren't scripted moments. That was Elvis being Elvis. Elvis didn't just show kindness in passing. He built it into his world. He took care of his friends, the Memphis Mafia, yes, but also the people who worked quietly behind the scenes. If a grip's car broke down, Elvis brought him another. If a costume designer's mother got sick, Elvis paid the hospital bills quietly, without press. If a co-star was struggling with lines, he would stay to run scenes, never making them feel small for asking. Shelley Fabares once said, "He made you feel like you mattered." That's what I remember most. And Anne Margaret called their connection real trust. That trust came not from fame, but from care. He had no interest in one-upping anyone. He wanted everyone around him to shine. Because in his heart, he didn't see competition, he saw company. And of course he loved to laugh. Sets could be long, hot and exhausting, but Elvis had a way of turning fatigue into joy. He'd sneak behind the cameras, slip on a pair of goofy glasses and pull faces when someone was trying to nail a dramatic scene. The crew would try not to laugh, but they'd all crack eventually, even the director. One assistant director said, if he was having a bad day, Elvis would notice before you did. He would nudge you, hand you a Coke and say, come on, let's fix that mood. He gave energy to everyone around him. That's not something fame can fake. In an era when Hollywood wasn't kind to women, Elvis Presley quietly was. He respected his leading ladies. He never barked orders, never interrupted, never made crude remarks. If anything, he was almost shy. Always asking, you okay, honey? Want to do another take? Mary Tyler Moore said working with him was surprisingly tender. He made space for her in scenes, gave her lines room to breathe, and treated her ideas as equal to his own. He wasn't trying to outshine anyone. He was trying to make the moment work. That's the mark of a true artist and a true gentleman. When the filming wrapped, the kindness didn't stop. He sent Christmas gifts to crew members long after the movies were done. He'd invite people to Graceland who had once held the boom mic or driven the studio van. And years later, when some of those people told stories about him, their eyes still softened. They didn't talk about Elvis the star. They talked about Elvis, my friend. But when the lights faded and the camera stopped rolling, what stayed was not the fame, but the feeling he gave people, that they mattered. You see, Elvis never forgot what it was like to be small, to be the boy in hand-me-down clothes who was told he'd never make it. So when he made it, he refused to look down on anyone. He didn't confuse stardom with superiority. He knew fame was borrowed, but kindness was forever. Maybe that's why his sets were so different from others, because people just didn't work for Elvis Presley. They worked with him. He made even Hollywood feel a little more like home. Today we remember the music, the style, the legend, but the truest measure of Elvis Presley isn't in records sold or awards won. It's in the way people remember how he made them feel. There's a line somewhere, someone once said, you can tell the size of a man by the way he treats those who can do nothing for him. If that's true, then Elvis Presley was 10 feet tall. He never had to be kind, but he was. He never had to be humble, but he stayed that way. And that's why behind the glitter, behind the fame, there will always be the man who smiled first, thanked everyone last, and meant it every single time. So here's to Elvis Presley, not just the king of rock and roll, but the king of courtesy, the king of heart, the man who taught Hollywood that kindness is the greatest performance of all.